He is the chair of the American Studies Department at the University of Tehran, capital of Iran. And what a time to be so. He is Professor Seyed Marandi, one of our most important and most popular guests on the mother of all talk shows. Professor Marandi, I've lost count of the number of times I've had to say so, but the condolences to your people from our audience on the loss of life in your embassy in Damascus. It was a heinous but also foolish crime, which has changed the whole paradigm of diplomatic relations, protection of embassies, ambassadors, diplomats. It turns the world upside down, and that's presumably what it was intended to do, isn't it?
Absolutely, and thank you very much. But I would also like to congratulate you on your victory, and I'd like to congratulate all those people who are working against war and against the genocide in Gaza, who supported you and who are a part of this victory. But you're absolutely correct. It's obvious that not only the Israeli regime is trying to turn the region upside down, it's trying to turn the world upside down. They are trying to escape defeat. They've suffered a major defeat on the battlefield, and they've suffered a defeat in the eyes of the global community, in the sense that they've been exposed to be genocidal, brutal, and illegitimate. And therefore, I believe that this escalation was to find a path to victory, to escape, or at least a path to escape this defeat. But it's not going to make things any better for the regime. But what is, I think, important is that the West, the collective West, the United States, Britain, France, the European Union, they've already demolished their soft power, because the world has seen them as supporters of genocide. But in the UN Security Council, when they refused to condemn this attack on the embassy, an attack that consisted of violating Syrian airspace, bombing the Iranian embassy, and killing Iranian officials, by refusing to condemn this, these Western countries have again exposed themselves to the international community as being both void of any morality, but also utterly hypocritical, because the West is always speaking about international law and international norms. But this is unique, what has happened. Never before has an embassy been intentionally bombed, or at least openly. In the case of Yugoslavia, we had a somewhat similar incident, but they never, they always at least pretended that it was a mistake. But here it was an assault on the embassy, and the number of people who were killed was significantly higher. So by refusing to condemn this, the West is showing that it has no respect for international law that was designed in a way which benefited the West. So again, the West is sacrificing itself for Israel. And this I find to be extraordinary.
Yeah, well, I think we are also, and we are in the West, and we find it as inexplicable as it is extraordinary. Only now, with the death of 3 British military veterans who may or may not still have been in service somehow of the British government, who were cruelly, systematically murdered, hunted down like they were wild animals, like they were game on a safari shoot, and murdered in cold blood. Only now are we seeing, finally, people who hitherto would have smeared you if you had criticized Israel are now on their front pages demanding answers. from the killers of our men. So I'm wondering if you have. I ask this of all my guests, mainly because I don't have an answer to it myself. I know the answer to most things, as do you, but I don't know the answer to this. Why? Why are these Western countries so prostituting themselves for a tiny little country on the Mediterranean of 7 million people, thousands of miles away?
My answer, I'm sure, is no better than the answer that you can give. But the influence of Zionism in the United States, in Europe, in the UK, in Canada is immense. And again, I'd like to stress that most Zionists are not Jews. Most Zionists are Christians. In fact, many Zionists are not even religious. So no one should blame any particular religion or any particular group for Zionism. But Zionism is very influential, very powerful. And what is actually more surprising to me is not how the West has been captivated by Zionism. What I find so extraordinary is how this is falling apart in the eyes of public opinion. I never thought I'd live to see the day when so many young people in the United States, in Europe, in London, in England, in the UK would stand up to this regime. Young Jews, young Christians, young Muslims, Hindus, people from all walks of life. I never thought I'd see this day. And for me, it creates a great deal of optimism. We're all terribly saddened. We wake up in the morning, literally one of the first things that I see, like yourself, are the scenes in Gaza. When we go to sleep at night, probably one of the last things I do is check my Twitter feed and see more clips of Gaza, but which is, of course, very painful and depressing for many people. But the shift, the change that we're seeing among the younger generation is amazing. And the very fact that the United States is so keen on swiftly shutting down TikTok is basically because they've recognized that the eyes of the younger generation have opened. So while this ugly ideology has a hold over the Congress and the White House, and they are influential in the corridors of power across Europe. But I think on the streets, the situation has changed dramatically. And I personally believe that the Israeli regime needs a ceasefire more than anyone else, regardless of the fact that people are being slaughtered. And we all want an immediate ceasefire for the sake of preserving lives. But that aside, the side that needs a ceasefire desperately is the Israeli regime, because every day that this genocide continues, hostility towards the regime grows across the world, and people's views towards Israel, their negative views, become increasingly entrenched. So they're utterly foolish for continuing this war, which they cannot win. Whether they escalate or not, it's not a war that they can win.
Professor, the CIA say that within 48 hours, your government, your state, is going to retaliate against the crime in Damascus. I don't know how they would know that, or if they just made it up. But given the quite widely held view held amongst your friends, like Pepe Escobar on this very show earlier, that this was intended as a trap, that it is intended to lead to a wider and bigger conflagration, wouldn't Iran be advised not to respond in kind?
That's a very good question. And I think that the reason why the Iranians have not responded to Israeli provocations over the past 6 months is because the Iranians want the focus to be on Gaza. They don't want the Israeli regime to be able to shift the debate away from Gaza to an Iran-Israeli conflict or to an Israeli-Hezbollah conflict. Israel has to be defeated in the eyes of public opinion across the world in Gaza. The focus has to be on what the regime is doing to the people of Gaza. So the Iranians were patient. The Israeli regime murdered a number of Iranian military officers in Syria, and the Iranians didn't respond directly, at least. But this is a different type of attack. This was an attack on Iranian sovereignty. It was an attack on the Iranian embassy. And if the Iranians, the argument in Tehran is that if the Iranians don't respond adequately, then the regime will see this as some sort of sign of weakness, or that the regime will feel that they've crossed all red lines so they can start striking anywhere that they want. So my understanding is that the Iranians will strike back at Israel, and it will be a substantially painful strike.
But obviously you don't know when, and even if you did, you wouldn't tell me, but you won't know it anyway. You're an academic, a professor. Is there any reason to believe the CIA prediction of within 48 hours? Is that in the chat in Iran in any way?
Well, George, the CIA seems to be very good at predicting bomb attacks in Moscow and where they're going to take place. And in that sort of thing, they turn out to be quite good, in fact. And they are able to inform us literally less than an hour after the attack that it wasn't Ukraine and it had nothing to do with Ukraine. So when it comes to these sort of things, the CIA, I have to admit, they have done a very good job. But I don't know when the Iranians will strike. I doubt that the CIA knows definitely when Iran will strike. But I think that maybe it is possible that it may happen within the coming hours, and it may take longer. What I do know is there will be a response, and probably the CIA is a bit of this is psychological. So we'll have to wait and see. But what I can say is that the Iranians would have preferred not to respond because the Iranians want the focus to be on Gaza and to put pressure on the regime because of Gaza. And not only does the Israeli regime, but the collective West would like to distract attention away from Gaza. But this demands a response. So I think the Iranians will respond in a way in which it both creates a deterrence in future, but also in a way so that the Israeli regime will not be able to shift the narrative away from their genocide against the people of Palestine.
Professor Marandi, as always, a big thank you for your wisdom and your time.
Thank you, George.
Professor Mohammad Marandi, Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran.